My boyfriend's pure and innocent childhood friend came to my OB GYN clinic, and I found she was infected with 3 different STDs. My boyfriend didn't believe me. In a fit of rage, he splashed hot coffee right in my face. Do you have any idea how pure Lily is? She's never even held a guy's hand. If you're going to make up lies to slander her, at least make them believable. That night, he turned my hospital ID photo into a meme with the caption "Psycho DOC" and blasted it across all our professional Snapchat groups.
I was forced to resign.
I was stalked, and my door was defaced with red paint, until one night someone locked my garage door from the outside and let car exhaust fill the space. Before my consciousness faded, my phone screen lit up. It was a text from him. "If you had just disappeared sooner, Lily and I would have been together by now." But when I opened my eyes again, I was back in my clinic. She was sitting right across from me, smiling like a sweet, innocent angel. This time, I calmly slid the paper over. "Here's your report. See for yourself." Since he believed she was so pure, then let her be pure. After all, I wasn't the one getting infected. "Dr. Vance, are my test results ready?" Lily Adams sat across from me, nervously twisting the hem of her dress. I looked at the lab report in my hand. The red bold letters were blinding. Secondary syphilis, gonorrhea, and genital warts. To contract these 3 STDs at the same time, she must have had an incredibly wild sex life in my past life. For the sake of her and Ethan's health, I had taken this report out to the waiting room to explain the situation to Ethan Cole. What I got in return was a cup of scalding coffee to my face, 6 months of relentless cyberbullying, and a suffocating death in a locked garage. This time, I took a deep breath and slid the lab report directly in front of Lily. "Miss Adams, see for yourself." Lily picked up the paper with a confused look. In an instant, her face drained of all color. "This is impossible. How could I have these dirty diseases? You hospital's equipment must be broken." I leaned back in my chair and said, "Seriously? These numbers don't lie. And looking at your current symptoms, if you don't start treatment immediately, you might lose your fertility." Lily's tears spilled over instantly. She leaped up, rushed to my desk, and grabbed my hand. "Chloe, please help me. Ethan and you are the only people I know in the city. I swear. I must have caught this from a public swimming pool a few days ago. You have to believe me." Looking at her tearful, pathetic act, I wanted to laugh. Getting 3 STDs from a public pool? Who is she trying to fool? It doesn't matter if I believe you or not. What matters is the treatment. I glanced at the cracked open door of the clinic. "Ethan is waiting for you outside. Should I call him in and explain the situation to him in detail?" "No," Lily screamed frantically, covering the lab report. "Chloe, I beg of you, please don't tell Ethan. He's always thought of me as a pure, clean girl. If he finds out I have this, he will definitely leave me." She fell to her knees in front of me, crying like a victim. "As long as you don't say anything, I'll do whatever you want." I looked down at her. I hadn't realized in my past life how desperately she would go to keep up her innocent facade. In front of Ethan. You're an adult. You have the right to patient confidentiality," I said calmly, pulling my hand away. "Since you don't want him to know, then we won't tell him." Lily sighed in relief, nodding and thanking me repeatedly. She frantically stuffed the real lab report into her designer handbag. But how should I explain this to Ethan in a minute? I opened my computer and pulled up a blank template. 3 minutes later, I printed out a fake report showing all negative results. "If he asks, tell him everything is normal." Lily took the pure and clean report. A flash of gratitude crossed her eyes, quickly replaced by a smug smirk. She was probably mocking my stupidity, thinking I had given in to my romantic rival so easily. The door was suddenly shoved open. Ethan Cole stormed in. He didn't even look at me. He went straight to Lily. "Lily, how are you? Are you feeling sick anywhere?" He gently helped Lily up, his voice filled with self-reproach. "I told you we shouldn't have come here. This doctor has always hated you. She definitely didn't give you a good attitude." Lily immediately leaned into his chest, weakly raising the fake report. "Ethan, don't blame Chloe," she said.
"I'm perfectly fine."
Only then did Ethan deign to look at me, his eyes full of undisguised suspicion. "Chloe, did you actually check her thoroughly?" I looked up and politely met his gaze. "The report is completely normal. Congratulations." Since he firmly believes she was pure, let them enjoy their pure intimacy. I wasn't the one getting dirty anyway. Then let out a cold snort and wrapped his arm tightly around Lily's shoulders. "At least you know your place. Let's go home. Lily, I'll make your favorite steamed fish tonight." Lily looked back at me, a look of smug triumph in her eyes. I sat in my chair, quietly watching their figures fade away. The real show was just getting started. After work, I didn't go to the grocery store to buy the seafood Ethan liked, as I usually did. Instead, I went straight back to the apartment. We co-wooned as soon as I pushed the door open. Lily's giggles echoed from the living room. I was wearing a silk pajama set I had just bought, lounging on the sofa, opening her mouth to eat grapes. Ethan was hand-feeding her. Seeing me walk in, Ethan's face immediately darkened. "Why are you just getting back? You didn't even make dinner. Are you trying to starve Lily?" He slammed the fruit plate onto the coffee table.
She's a guest.
"Do you have any decency as the lady of this house?" My hands paused as I took off my shoes. The lady of this house. He had probably given that title to Lily in his heart a long time ago. "I'm a doctor, not your full-time maid." I walked straight to the sofa and looked at Lily. Besides, Miss Adams doesn't look like she should be eating cold,
Raw fruit right now.
Lily's face froze, and she instinctively pulled down the hem of the pajamas. She glanced at me guiltily, then bit her lip, her eyes turning red. "Ethan, does Chloe not like me wearing her clothes? I'll take them off right now."
I'm so sorry.
She made a move to stand up, but Ethan held her down. "Don't you dare. I told you to wear them." Ethan spun around and glared at me like I was his worst enemy. "Chloe, don't be so ungrateful. It's just a pajama set. Do you have to be so incredibly petty? Lily is fragile. Would letting her borrow your clothes kill you?" I watched him throw a tantrum over another woman. In my past life, these words would have broken my heart, and I would have rushed into the kitchen to cook and appease him. But now looking at them just made me sick. And she's worn it. She can keep it. I turned toward my bedroom. "I find it dirty." I wasn't just talking about the clothes. I was talking about her. Lily clearly understood my hidden meaning. Her body trembled, her fingers digging deep into the sofa cushions. She knew she carried 3 STDs, so the word dirty hit her like a physical blow. Ethan was completely enraged. He took 3 quick steps, grabbing my wrist tightly. "What did you just say?"
Who's dirty? Do you want me to slap you?
Raised his hand high. I stared back at him without flinching, my eyes as calm as a stagnant pool of water. "Go ahead, Ethan.
Try it.
If that hand lands on me, I will call the police tomorrow. And I'll send the ledger of all the kickbacks you've taken to your boss." Ethan's hand froze in midair, his face turning an ugly shade of green. He looked at me in disbelief, as if he couldn't believe I would threaten him like this. "Are you crazy? We've been together for 3 years. And you're threatening me over this petty crap?" I yanked my hand back with force. 3 years is just a lesson learned. Let's call it a mistake. I'm moving out tonight. I'll have my lawyer handle the division of this apartment. You'd better prepare yourself with that. I walked into the bedroom and locked the door behind me. Outside, Ethan's furious curses and Lily's fake, comforting whispers drifted through the door. "Ethan, it's all my fault. I'll move out tomorrow. Don't leave. If she wants to throw a fit, let her. Let's see where she can actually go." I pulled out my suitcase and began packing my valuables and documents. Halfway through, my phone vibrated. It was an informal hospital Snapchat group. Someone had posted a blurry photo of a female patient wearing a mask, taking medication at the pharmacy window. "Isn't this the woman who visited Dr. Vance's clinic this afternoon? Why is she sneakily picking up long-acting penicillin? Look how sketchy she's being. 10 to 1.
She's got that disease."
I looked at the screen, a cold smile forming on my lips, terrified of Ethan finding out Lily hadn't gone to a specialist. She was trying to quietly suppress the disease with antibiotics. But syphilis and genital warts weren't things you could just wave away with a few pills. She was playing with fire. I stuffed a few everyday clothes into the suitcase and opened the door. In the living room, Ethan was holding Lily, comforting her. Hearing the door open, he turned and saw my suitcase. Flash of panic crossed his eyes, quickly masked by anger. "Chloe, look at you acting all tough. Moving out in the middle of the night." He stood up, blocking my path. "I'm telling you, once you walk out that door, don't you ever think about coming back." I stopped and looked at his pathetic, blustering face.
Fine.
I walked right past him without a second thought. At the door, I glanced back at Lily, who was huddled on the sofa. "Miss Adams." Lily snapped her head up, her eyes filled with sheer terror. Afraid I would spill her secret, I gave her a sweet smile. "Remember to take your meds on time. Ignoring your illness will only lead to bigger problems." Ignoring Ethan's furious shouting, I stepped out into the night and never looked back. I moved into a long-term rental apartment near the hospital. 3 days later, I contacted a real estate agent and handed over all the records, showing I paid the vast majority of the down payment to my lawyer. That apartment had to be sold immediately. Wouldn't leave Ethan a single dime. During my afternoon rounds,
My phone rang.
it was Ethan. He had been calling me every day. His tone had shifted from furious insults to a softer, pleading demeanor. I walked to the end of the hall and picked up Chloe. "Where are you?" His voice sounded incredibly exhausted. "You've been throwing this tantrum for days. Isn't it time to cool off? Come home tonight?" "Lily said she wants to cook dinner to apologize to you." I stared at the traffic outside the window, my voice flat. "Ethan, you should have received my lawyer's letter. I'm not throwing a tantrum. If you don't sign the property division agreement, I'll see you in court there." There was a silence on the other end followed by a sudden roar. "Chloe, are you fucking kidding me? Just because Lily is staying here for a few days, do you want to sell the apartment? Does our 3-year relationship mean absolutely nothing to you?" He panted heavily, trying to suppress his rage. "Lily suddenly got a massive rash all over her body yesterday. She's running a fever so bad her face is pale. She refuses to go to the hospital because she's terrified you'll give her attitude again. As a doctor, can you put your petty jealousy aside for once and come take a look at her?" Hearing this, I almost burst out laughing. A massive rash that was a textbook secondary syphilis rash, combined with her drug abuse. Her immune system was utterly collapsing. Lily didn't dare go to a real hospital because she knew she would be exposed instantly. "She won't come to the hospital. How can I treat her?" I replied coldly. "I don't have time for house calls. If she's that sick, she needs to see a doctor properly."
You.
Ethan choked on his words, completely powerless.
Fine, Chloe.
"You're heartless. I'll take her to a private clinic myself. We don't need your fake sympathy." He slammed the phone down, looking at the dark screen. I put his number on Do Not Disturb. A private clinic.
Perfect.
Those shady, unsecured, private clinics loved using heavy steroids to temporarily suppress visible symptoms. It would only make Lily's condition deteriorate faster. After work, I stopped by the real estate agency. The agent told me there were several interested buyers, but because Ethan lived there and refused to open the door, they couldn't do any showings. "Dr. Vance, if the Connor refuses to cooperate, it's going to be very hard to sell this place at market value." I tapped my fingers on the desk, an idea forming in my mind. "Bring the buyers tomorrow afternoon," I said, handing a spare key to the agent.
He won't be home then.
"There's only a female guest staying there. Just ignore her." The next afternoon, using the excuse of picking up the rest of my belongings, I went back to the apartment early. As I approached the door, before I could even pull out my key, a series of breathless, gasping sounds echoed from inside. "Ethan, gentler. What if Chloe suddenly comes back?" Lily's sweet, whiny voice drifted through the thin door. "Don't mention that buzzkill of a woman." Ethan panted, his voice dripping with lust. "She's practically frigid. Anyway, you're much better, my sweet Lily. Let me show you how much I love you." I stood outside, my hand holding the key without a single tremble. In my past life, they had hooked up behind my back and I had stupidly confronted them, only to be turned into the villain. This time I felt that even getting angry was a waste of energy. I pulled out my phone, turned on the voice recorder, and quietly leaned against the wall for 10 minutes. Right on cue, I heard the elevator ding. The agent walked out with a middle-aged couple. "Oh, Dr. Vance, you're here. Great, great." The agent greeted me warmly. I made a shushing gesture, then turned the key and opened the door.
Click.
The door swung open. The living room was a disaster zone. Clothes scattered everywhere. The two bodies tangled on the sofa froze instantly, as if struck by lightning.
Ah.
Lily let out a blood-curdling shriek, frantically grabbing clothes from the floor to cover herself. The silence in the room lasted for perhaps 2 seconds, long enough for the middle-aged prospective buyers, Mr. and Mrs. Albright, to take in the tangled heap of limbs on the cream-colored sectional sofa. Lily's shriek pierced the air, sharp and hysterical, as she scrambled backward, dragging a decorative throw blanket over her bare shoulders. Her face, previously flushed with exertion, turned chalk white. Ethan scrambled off her, tripping over his half-buttoned trousers and crashing awkwardly against the glass coffee table. A glass vase wobbled, tipped, and shattered across the hardwood floor. "What the fuck?" Ethan bellowed, his voice cracking as he hauled his waistband up with trembling fingers. His eyes darted from the open doorway to me, burning with raw fury.
Chloe.
"Are you out of your goddamn mind? What is this?" I didn't blink. I stepped into the foyer, holding the door open with one manicured hand, and turned to the real estate agent and the horrified couple behind me. "As you can see," I said smoothly, my voice ringing with clinical detachment, "the living room boasts a spacious open-concept layout with ample natural light. from the south-facing windows. The hardwood flooring is genuine oak, though you may want to have the surfaces thoroughly sanitized before moving in. Mrs. Albright's jaw dropped. She clutched her handbag against her chest as if shielding herself from airborne pathogens. Young lady, this is disgraceful.
We
We're told this was a vacant viewing. It was supposed to be, I replied calmly. Unfortunately, squatters and uninvited guests are an occasional hazard of joint ownership. Don't worry, the eviction paperwork is already in motion. Chloe, shut your fucking mouth. Ethan roared, lunging toward me. Before he could reach the foyer, Mr. Albright, a broad-shouldered man with a military posture, stepped squarely in front of him, his arm raised in warning. Take one more step toward her, son, and I'll put you through that drywall.
put
Some clothes on, and learn some basic human decency. Ethan stopped dead, his chest heaving, his face mottled with purple rage.
He
Glanced around desperately, realizing he was utterly exposed, both literally and figuratively. Lily was sobbing loudly on the sofa, clutching the blanket up to her chin, her eyes darting between Ethan and me. Ethan, make them leave. Please, make them leave. I can't breathe. I'm having a panic attack. Don't look at her. Ethan snapped at the Albrights, trying to shield Lily with his back.
She's sick.
She's an innocent victim here. Chloe, you planned this. You brought strangers into our home just to humiliate Lily. Our home. I let out a soft, dry laugh. Ethan, your name isn't on the mortgage.
Date.
You contributed 12% of the down payment, while I covered 88% plus the closing costs and renovation expenses. Legally, you are a co-tenant at will. And as for Miss Adams, I shifted my gaze to Lily. Under the dim chandelier light, I noticed the patchy, reddish spots dotting her neck and clavicle, the rapid spread of a secondary syphilitic roseola, barely concealed beneath heavy layers of liquid foundation. Miss Adams has no legal right to reside on these premises, I continued, meeting Lily's panic stare. And judging by her visible condition, she shouldn't be engaging in strenuous physical activity. Friction and elevated body temperature can severely accelerate lesion ulceration. Lily gasped, her hand instinctively flying to her neck, pressing the blanket tighter, her eyes dilated with pure terror. She knew exactly what I was referring to. Ethan, completely blind to the medical subtext, took it as a personal insult. You heartless bitch. You're still slandering her. Lily is cleaner than you'll ever be. I truly hope you maintain that confidence over the coming weeks, Ethan, I said, a polite, razor-sharp smile curving my lips. Agent Miller, why don't we show Mr. and Mrs. Albright the master bedroom? Or perhaps we should let the local police department assist our guests in gathering their belongings. At the mention of the police, Ethan stiffened. He knew that any formal police report would jeopardize his pending promotion at the regional logistics firm, where he worked as a senior procurement manager. We're leaving. Ethan ground out through clenched teeth, grabbing his shirt from the floor and throwing a bundle of Lily's scattered clothes into her lap. We're leaving right now. But Chloe, you will pay for this. I swear to God, you will regret every second of this. I look forward to it, I murmured. 5 minutes later, Ethan dragged a weeping, disheveled Lily out into the corridor. As the elevator doors slid shut between us, Ethan gave me a look of pure venom, the exact same murderous look he had given me in my past life right before he splashed scalding coffee across my face. Only this time, there was no coffee. There was only the slow, silent ticking of a biological time bomb he had eagerly planted inside his own body. I spent the next 48 hours with my attorney, Arthur Henderson, at his downtown office. Arthur was a veteran litigator specializing in real estate division and high-asset civil disputes. As I laid out the financial paper trail, bank transfer, receipts, down payment escrows, mortgage payment histories from my personal account, and the audio recording from outside the apartment door, his silver eyebrows rose in mild amusement. This is open and shut, Dr. Vance, Arthur said, tapping the documents with his Mont-Blanc pen. He doesn't have the liquidity to buy out your equity, and given his hostile behavior and unauthorized cohabitation, the judge will issue an expedited order for partition by sale. I'll also file an emergency restraining order barring him from entering the premises without a court officer present. Good, I said. And what about the corporate documentation? I pushed a separate manila folder across the mahogany desk. Inside were copies of private ledger entries, vendor invoices, and encrypted chat logs I had retrieved from Ethan's old laptop months before my death in the previous life. Ethan had been accepting under-the-table kickbacks from third-party freight contractors, funneling the illicit bonuses into an offshore account while submitting inflated logistics budgets to his employer, Apex Global Logistics. In my past life, I had discovered these files by accident and kept them safe, intending to confront him gently and urge him to come clean before he ruined his
life.
He had repaid my loyalty with murder. In this life, loyalty was dead. This, Arthur murmured, skimming through the wire transfers, is devastating. If this reaches Apex's internal audit division and the district attorney's financial crimes unit, your ex-boyfriend will not only be fired, he'll be looking at 5 to 7 years in a federal penitentiary. Don't file it yet, I instructed quietly. Let him spend his remaining savings on Lily first. Let him exhaust every dollar, every favor, and every ounce of his pride trying to save his pure angel. When he is at his absolute lowest, we will drop the hammer. Arthur looked at me, a flicker of genuine respect, and perhaps a touch of caution in his eyes. Understood, Dr. Vance. You are remarkably composed for someone who just survived a 3-year betrayal. Survival changes your perspective, Arthur, I said softly, standing up. Don't get angry anymore. I just execute. By Thursday afternoon, the hospital was bustling. As a senior OB GYN attending physician, my schedule was packed with routine exams, laparoscopic ovarian cystectomies, and prenatal consultations. Around 3:30 p.m., while reviewing a pathology report at the nurse's station, my junior resident, Dr. Maya Lin, tapped my shoulder. Dr. Vance, sorry to interrupt, but there's a patient in the outpatient triage asking for you specifically. She refused to see any other doctor and created a scene in the lobby. I glanced up. Name? Lily Adams. Maya lowered her voice, leaning closer. She looks awful, Dr.
Vance.
She's wearing a heavy trench coat, sunglasses, and a silk scarf pulled up to her nose, even though it's 75 degrees outside. She has a high-grade fever, 102.8, and she's shaking uncontrollably. Did she come with anyone?
No.
She's alone. She keeps crying and saying she needs a private consultation with you immediately. A cold, deliberate satisfaction washed through my veins. Put her in examination. Room 4. I'll be there in 5 minutes. When I pushed the door open to exam room 4, the sight before me was pathetic. Lily sat curled on the examination table, her knees pulled tight against her chest. The moment she heard the door latch click, she ripped off her dark
sunglasses.
Her eyes were bloodshot, surrounded by dark, hollow circles. The skin on her face, normally porcelain smooth, was covered in patchy, raised maculopapular lesions that had begun to erupt across her forehead, cheeks, and down her neck. Her lips were cracked, dry, and coated with a thin whitish film. Chloe, Lily rasped, her voice trembling so violently her teeth chattered. You have to save me.
Please.
Look at me.
What is happening to me?
I picked up the chart from the door mount, stepped toward the counter, and put on a pair of sterile latex gloves with slow, methodical precision. Miss Adams, I thought you preferred shady private clinics that hand out high-dose steroid injections like candy. Lily flinched, bursting into desperate tears. How? How did you know? Because anyone with basic medical knowledge could predict what would happen, I said, stepping closer and lifting her chin with a gloved finger. The rash wasn't just on her face. When I gently pulled back the collar of her shirt, her upper chest was covered in classical copper red, non-pruritic syphilitic rosacea, mixed with secondary pustular eruptions triggered by corticosteroid-induced immunosuppression. Let me guess, I said, clinical neutrality dripping from every syllable.
You
went to an unlicensed cosmetic or private clinic because you were terrified of being reported to the Central Disease Registry. They diagnosed you with an allergic dermatitis or stress rash, gave you a heavy shot of dexamethasone or betamethasone, and prescribed you some topical steroid cream. Lily nodded frantically, tears carving trails through her peeling skin.
Yes.
The doctor there said it was just a severe allergic reaction to seafood.
He gave
me 2 injections and said the redness would fade in 12 hours. But when I woke up this morning, my whole body was burning. I have blisters down there, and it hurts so much I can barely walk. Of course it hurts, I said, stepping back and tossing the disposable tongue depressor into the biohazard bin. Steroids suppress your immune system.
When
you inject powerful immunosuppressants into a body fighting active secondary syphilis and a rampant genital HPV outbreak, You aren't curing the infection. You're turning off the fire alarms while the house burns down. You gave the bacteria free rein to multiply exponentially. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She slid off the table and dropped straight to the linoleum floor, grabbing the hem of my white lab coat with both hands. Chloe, I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have slept with Ethan in your apartment. I shouldn't have taken your clothes. But I'm dying. I feel like my blood is boiling. Please, write me a prescription. Give me the real medicine.
I'll pay.
You anything. Ethan has money. He'll pay for everything. I looked down at her, watching her grovel on the floor just as I had died on the concrete floor of my garage, choking on carbon monoxide while Ethan's text mocked my demise. Where did Ethan get that money, Lily? I asked quietly. Lily froze, her tear-streaked face looking up in confusion. What? Do you really think Ethan loves you for who you are? I leaned down slightly, my voice dropping to a whisper. Ethan loves an illusion. He loves the fantasy of a pristine, untouchable virgin goddess who needs his masculine protection.
If
He finds out that your medical history includes multiple high-risk partners, secondary syphilis, antibiotic-resistant gonorrhea, and severe condyloma. Acuminata, do you think he will spend a single dime on you?
No.
Lily wailed, shaking her head hysterically. You can't tell him. You promised patient confidentiality. You took an oath. I don't need to tell him, Lily, I said calmly, pulling my coat from her grip. Because you've already told him yourself with your body. Lily's eyes widened in sheer horror. What do you mean? Syphilis in its secondary stage is exceptionally infectious. The mucocutaneous lesions are teeming with treponema pallidum, and with the friction and lack of barrier protection from your little afternoon tryst on my sofa, Ethan's transmission rate was nearly 100%. I checked my watch. His incubation period should be wrapping up right about now. In fact, if he hasn't already developed a painless primary chancre, he will within 48
hours.
Followed by severe burning dysuria from the gonorrhea. Lily stared at me, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly, completely paralyzed by the realization of what she had done. Now, I continued, walking over to the computer terminal. As a physician, I cannot refuse you emergency stabilization. I am placing an order for standard intramuscular benzathine penicillin G and ceftriaxone, along with a referral to the infectious disease ward for continuous monitoring. However, because your case involves extensive secondary complications and prior steroid abuse, you will need to be admitted immediately. Admitted? Lily gasped. If I get admitted, Ethan will find out. He works right across the street. He'll come here. Then you can choose to refuse admission and walk out that door, I replied, coldly, printing out the refusal of treatment waiver and sliding it across the
Desk.
Sign here, and you can continue treating yourself with pool water and steroid shots. Let's see if you make it to the tertiary neurosyphilis stage before the end of the month. Lily looked at the paper, then at the bright red biohazard symbol on the wall, and finally broke down into jagged, breathless sobs. She signed the admission papers with a shaking hand, while Lily was wheeled up to the isolation wing of the infectious disease department. Ethan was experiencing his own personal nightmare at the corporate headquarters of Apex Global Logistics. It began on Friday morning during the weekly executive strategy briefing. Ethan was standing at the podium in the main boardroom, presenting the quarterly supply chain metrics to Vice President Marcus Sterling and the senior board members. Halfway through the third slide, a sudden, excruciating wave of burning pain surged through his lower abdomen. Ethan gasped, his hand gripping the edge of the mahogany podium so hard his knuckles turned white. Mr. Cole, VP Sterling frowned, peering over his half-moon reading glasses. Are you all right? Yes, sir. Just a sudden stomach cramp, Ethan stammered, his forehead instantly breaking out into a cold, clammy sweat. He tried to shift his weight, but the friction of his wool trousers against his groin sent a jolt of fire through his nerve endings. For the past 2 days, he had noticed a small, firm sore on his body, but he had dismissed it as an ingrown hair or a minor friction burn from his intense session with Lily. Now, however, the burning sensation was accompanied by an agonizing, throbbing ache and a sudden, uncontrollable fever that made the room spin around him. As I was saying, Ethan choked out, his vision blurring. The shipping consolidation in the southwest sector. A drop of sweat rolled down his nose and splattered onto his presentation notes. His knees buckled slightly. Ethan, you look like a corpse, Sterling said bluntly, cutting him off.
Sit down.
Miller, take over the slides. Cole, go to the medical clinic on the ground floor or go home. You're disrupting the meeting. Humiliated, Ethan stumbled out of the boardroom under the judgmental stares of his colleagues. Instead of going to the company clinic, where rumors spread like wildfire, Ethan drove straight to the luxury high-rise apartment he had temporarily rented after being kicked out of our joint home. In the privacy of his bathroom, Ethan stripped off his pants and looked down. What he saw made his blood run completely cold. The small bump had erupted into an open, ulcerated chancre, accompanied by a thick, yellowish purulent discharge and swollen, tender lymph nodes in his groin that felt like hard marbles beneath his skin. What the fuck is this? Ethan muttered frantically, his hands shaking as he grabbed his phone. What is this? Did I get a urinary tract infection from the gym shower? Even at this stage, his brain refused to connect the dots to Lily. In his mind, Lily was a virgin saint, a fragile flower who had never known another man. He quickly dialed Lily's number. The number you are calling has been forwarded to an automated voice message. He dialed again. Voicemail. Panicking, Ethan opened his laptop and began typing his symptoms into a medical search engine. Within seconds, the screen filled with diagnostic images. Primary syphilis, chancre. Acute gonococcal urethritis, high risk of co-infection with HPV/HSV. Ethan stared at the screen, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps.
No.
Impossible. This is a mistake. Chloe must have poisoned the towels. She must have sprayed something on the sofa before she brought those people over. Driven by paranoid rage and mounting agony, Ethan threw on a pair of sweatpants, grabbed his car keys, and sped toward my hospital. It was 5:15 p.m. when Ethan burst through the double glass doors of the OB GYN outpatient pavilion. His face was flushed crimson with fever, his shirt soaked in sweat, and his gait awkward and splayed due to the intense pain between his legs. Where is Chloe Vance? Ethan screamed, slamming his fist onto the reception counter. Several pregnant patients and their partners were coiled in shock.
Get
that psycho bitch out here right now. She tried to poison me. The head nurse, Nurse Brenda, a formidable woman who had worked in emergency triage for 20 years, stood up immediately, pressing the silent security alarm. Under the desk. Sir, lower your voice immediately or security will escort you off the premises. This is a restricted clinical area. I don't give a damn, Ethan yelled, his voice cracking with hysteria. She used biohazard waste to contaminate my apartment. She infected me with some kind of toxic chemical. Tell her to come out here and face me. I stepped out of the staff lounge, holding a clipboard, flanked by two armed hospital security guards who had just arrived from the elevator bank. I'm right here, Ethan, I said calmly. Ethan spun around, his eyes wild and bloodshot. Chloe, you crazy, jealous psycho. Look what you did to me. I know it was you. You put something on the furniture to ruin my health because you couldn't stand seeing me with Lily. The waiting room went deathly silent. Everyone was staring. I looked at him with an expression of pure, clinical pity. Ethan, as a medical professional, I strongly advise you to lower your voice. You are currently experiencing the acute phase of a severe gonococcal urethritis, combined with a primary syphilitic chancre. Those are biological pathogens, transmitted via direct mucosal contact, not chemicals you can spray on a sofa. Ethan froze, his mouth hanging open. What did you just say? I said. I enunciated clearly, my voice carrying to every corner of the crowded lobby. You have contracted multiple sexually transmitted infections. And since you haven't slept with me in over 6 months, I suggest you ask your pure childhood friend where she spent her weekends before she moved into our living room. You're lying, Ethan bellowed, though his voice lacked conviction now, trembling with a sudden, horrifying realization. Lily is pure.
She was a
virgin. She tested negative. You gave me the report yourself. I gave her the real report, I replied smoothly, which showed active secondary syphilis, gonorrhea, and genital warts. When she begged me on her knees not to tell you because she was terrified you'd abandon her, I respected her patient privacy rights and printed a blank template for her to show you. She made her
choice, Ethan.
And you made yours. No, that's impossible. Ethan backed away, his hand clutching his chest, as if he couldn't breathe. Lily wouldn't do that to me. Lily loves me. If you don't believe me, I pointed toward the elevator bank behind him. Miss Adams is currently admitted in the infectious disease isolation wing, room 704. She was admitted 3 hours ago with severe steroid-induced syphilitic exacerbation and acute pelvic inflammatory disease. You're welcome to go up and ask her yourself. Ethan stood frozen in the center of the lobby for 5 agonizing seconds. Then, with a strangled cry that sounded like a wounded animal, he turned and sprinted toward the elevators, shoving past the security guards. Room 704 was dim and smelled strongly of antiseptic and medicinal ointments. Lily was lying in the hospital bed, and 4-line dripping high-dose penicillin into her arm. Her face was covered in soothing zinc oxide paste over the angry red lesions, and her eyes were swollen nearly shut. The door was kicked open with a thunderous bang. Lily gasped, sitting up in terror. Ethan? Ethan stood in the doorway, his eyes bloodshot, his chest heaving like a bellows. He didn't look like a loving boyfriend. He looked like a feral predator, driven mad by pain. He marched to the bedside, grabbed the medical chart hanging from the foot of the bed, and ripped open the diagnostic summary. Patient, Lily Adams admitting diagnosis, secondary syphilis, disseminated. Acute Neisseria gonorrhea infection, condyloma acuminata, extensive. Perineal/cervical. Notes: history of recurrent untreated STIs over 18-month period. Prior steroid misuse. The paper trembled in Ethan's hands until it tore down the center. 18 months. Ethan whispered, his voice dangerously low. 18 months. Lily pulled the sheets up to her chin, sobbing hysterically. Ethan, please. Let me explain. It's not what you think. I was assaulted. Someone drugged me at a party last year. You were assaulted? Ethan let out a manic, blood-curdling laugh.
He stepped
closer, towering over the bed. For 18 months? With 3 different fucking venereal diseases? And then you came to my city, pretended to be an innocent little virgin who never held a guy's hand, and begged me to sleep with you? Ethan, I love you. I only did it because I was scared of losing you. You infected me. Ethan screamed, grabbing the metal bed rail and shaking it with such violence that the 4-pole rattled against the ceiling. Look at me.
I
am rotting from the inside out because of you. You filthy, disgusting whore. Don't call me that. Lily shrieked, her sweet, fragile persona finally shattering under the pressure. Her voice turned sharp, grating, and venomous. You think you're such a great guy, Ethan? You're a pathetic loser. You only liked me because I flattered your fragile ego. You cheated on Chloe the second I smiled at you. You threw away a 3-year relationship with a successful doctor just because you wanted to play savior to a pretty face. You deserve this. You deserve every single drop of it. Ethan snapped. He lunged across the bed, his hands reaching for Lily's throat. Lily screamed, kicking wildly, knocking over the bedside table. Water pitchers, pill bottles, and medical trays crashed to the floor. Security. Code Gray, room 704. A nurse shouted from the corridor. 3 male security officers burst into the room, tackling Ethan to the floor. Just as his fingers brushed Lily's neck, Ethan thrashed wildly, screaming obscenities, kicking and biting like a rabid dog until a hospital physician administered an emergency intramuscular sedative. As Ethan went limp on the floor, his eyes rolled back, saliva pooling at the corner of his mouth. I stood in the doorway, watching the entire spectacle with my arms crossed over
my chest.
Lily caught my eye from the bed. Through her tears and white ointment, her face twisted in pure, impotent hatred. You did this, Chloe, she hissed, her voice trembling with malice. You knew this would happen. You planned this whole thing. I didn't give you those infections, Lily, I replied coldly, meeting her gaze, without an ounce of warmth. And I didn't force you into my bed with my boyfriend. You built your own trap, brick by brick. I merely stepped out of the way so you could fall into it. I turned on my heel and walked away, the sterile hospital lights reflecting cleanly off the polished floor ahead of me. The legal and professional fallout was swift, brutal, and utterly comprehensive. By Monday morning, the local police had formally charged Ethan Cole with aggravated domestic assault, trespassing, and intentional exposure to infectious pathogens, a felony in our jurisdiction given his violent rampage in the hospital. Because of the arrest, Apex Global Logistics immediately placed Ethan on administrative suspension pending an internal review. That was the exact moment Arthur Henderson struck. Arthur delivered the comprehensive financial embezzlement dossier directly to Apex's chief compliance officer and the federal district attorney's office. The evidence was undeniable, over $420,000 in kickbacks and fraudulent invoices. over a 2-year period, meticulously documented with corresponding bank timestamps and offshore routing numbers. By Tuesday afternoon, Apex fired Ethan with cause, revoked all vested stock options, and filed a civil lawsuit for full asset recovery, freezing every personal bank account Ethan owned. Ethan was released on bail, paid by his elderly parents who had to mortgage their suburban home to post the bond, only to find himself completely ruined.
He had no job.
He had no savings. His credit cards were frozen. He was facing 2 separate criminal indictments, and his body was breaking down. Because of his violent outburst in the hospital, the local medical network refused him outpatient privileges, forcing him to seek treatment at a underfunded county clinic where the wait times were grueling and the standard penicillin regimens were agonizingly painful. Worse, Ethan's gonorrhea strain proved to be partially resistant to standard fluoroquinolones, requiring intensive daily intramuscular injections that left him barely able to walk. Meanwhile, Lily's situation was even more catastrophic. When news of her extensive STI history and her public brawl with Ethan spread through their mutual social circles and college alumni networks, her carefully curated reputation as an innocent, high-class influencer evaporated overnight. Several of her previous wealthy partners, men she had quietly dated and infected, while maintaining her single, innocent persona, discovered the truth and launched a barrage of public exposés and civil lawsuits against her for intentional medical harm. Her family, deeply conservative and horrified by the public disgrace, completely cut her off financially and changed the locks on their family home. Stripped of her funds, her health in tatters, and her face permanently scarred by the deep secondary lesions that had ulcerated under the steroid abuse, Lily was discharged from the hospital with nowhere to go. 2 months later, the sale of the joint apartment had closed seamlessly. With Arthur's aggressive litigation, the court awarded me 92% of the net proceeds, deducting Ethan's outstanding legal fees and property damages from his meager 8% share. I took the proceeds, combined them with my savings, and purchased a gorgeous, sun-drenched penthouse condominium in the city's most secure luxury high-rise development, complete with 24-hour biometric security and private underground parking. Professionally, my career was soaring. I had published a groundbreaking research paper on early detection of atypical gynecological infections, earning me an invitation to join the prestigious St. Jude Women's Health Institute as Associate Director of Clinical Surgery. It was a crisp, golden autumn evening when I finished my final shift at the old hospital before transitioning to my new directorship. As I walked out of the staff entrance toward the parking structure, a figure stepped out from the shadows near the concrete pillars. Chloe. The voice was raspy, hollow, and barely recognizable. I stopped 10 feet away, my hand resting calmly on the personal alarm in my coat pocket. It was Ethan. He looked as though he had aged 20 years. He was emaciated, his designer clothes hanging off his sunken frame like rags. His skin was an unhealthy, jaundiced yellow, his hair thinning and greasy. His left leg dragged slightly as he walked, a lingering neurological complication from his delayed syphilis treatment and nerve inflammation. Ethan, I said, my voice flat and completely devoid of emotion. You are violating the 500-foot protection order. If you take one more step, the police will arrive in 3 minutes. Ethan didn't advance. Instead, his knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the damp concrete of the parking garage, his hands trembling violently. Chloe, please, he choked out, tears streaming down his gaunt, hollow cheeks. Please, I'm begging you. I have nothing left. My parents lost their house. The DA is offering a 5-year plea deal. I can't go to prison. I'll die in
there.
I looked at him, remembering the cold, terrifying darkness of my past life. The sound of the garage door locking from the outside, the thick smell of exhaust fumes burning my lungs, and the cruel words on my phone screen. If you had just disappeared sooner, Lily and I would have been together by now. Why are you here, Ethan? I asked quietly. I made a mistake, he sobbed, pressing his forehead against the cold pavement. Lily tricked me. She poisoned my mind. I never stopped loving you, Chloe. You're a doctor. You have connections at St. Jude's. You have money.
Help me.
Hire a good defense lawyer. Help me get the experimental nerve treatments.
If
you help me, I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I'll be your slave. I'll do whatever you want. I listened to his desperate, groveling pleas, feeling nothing inside.
No anger.
No pity.
No vindication.
Just the quiet, profound stillness of absolute closure. "Do you remember what you texted me, Ethan?" I said softly. Ethan looked up, blinking through his tears and confusion. What text?" "You told me that if I just disappeared, you and Lily would live happily ever after." Ethan's face went completely blank with shock. I never sent that text. When did I say that?" Of course he didn't remember. That text belonged to the timeline he had murdered, the timeline where my life was cut short in a dark garage. "You got exactly what you wanted, Ethan," I said, stepping backward toward the security checkpoint. "I disappeared from your life. And you got your sweet, innocent Lily. Every single thing that has happened to you was chosen by your own hands. Chloe."
No.
"Chloe, don't leave me," Ethan screamed, trying to crawl forward on his hands and knees, dragging his deadened leg behind him. "Chloe." Two uniformed security guards rounded the corner, their flashlights illuminating Ethan's pathetic, writhing form on the concrete. "Sir, stay on the ground. Do not move." I didn't turn back to watch them pin him to the floor. I didn't listen to his frantic, echoing screams as the handcuffs clicked into place. I walked out of the garage into the cool, crisp evening air. The city skyline stretched out before me, radiant and endless under the starlit
Sky.
The air was clean, fresh, and sweet in my lungs. My past was buried in the ashes where it belonged. My life, brilliant and unburdened, was just beginning.